All right, everyone. So today we're going to talk about the concerns of every piece of writing: author's purpose, audience, and form. So basically, what I want you guys to take away from this is that every single piece of writing has a purpose, has an audience, and has a form. And what you really just need to get used to is considering each of these before you ever start writing. All right, so let's take a look at it. So, author's purpose. We generally categorize author's purpose into three categories. So, there's narrative text, or text that where the author's purpose is to be narrative. That's what we describe it as, okay? And these include any text whose purpose is mainly to entertain or tell a story. So think of comics, novels, poetry. Um, they're going to have multiple purposes and there's going to be a lot of overlap, but their main purpose is to basically entertain you. Okay? Is this a TV show? Um, is this a children's book? It's to tell a story, it's something narrative. Okay? It could be me telling the story of my great grandpa getting lost in the woods, or it could be the TV drama I watch every week because I'm so addicted to it. Okay? So this is what's really meant to just give entertainment value. As you read here, the next kind of text, the next kind of purpose is our persuasive texts. These are any texts whose main purpose is, yes, you guessed it, persuade. These include anything such as letters to editors, persuasive essays, or any kind of advertisement. Now, persuasive essays or persuasive texts, their goal is to make their audience do something. And there's a lot of different types of texts that do that, whether it's a call to action, whether it's a revolutionary speech, but their goal is to make you do something as their audience, okay? And lastly, we have informational or expository text. Now, I put expository in a parentheses. That's because academically it's considered expository, but when you're in different settings, sometimes it's called informational. So informational texts are the same as expository texts, basically. But these are basically texts that are meant to explain, describe, or inform. Okay, so think about things like manuals, articles, or how-to texts. Now, the reason I want you to consider author's purpose is to just know that every single text has a different purpose. I'm going to go to the next page. Okay, but authors, and I did make this plural, purpose often overlap. So what I mean by that is often I'm not looking solely to entertain you, or I'm not looking solely to inform you, or I'm not looking solely to persuade you, entertain you, you know. I usually am doing a little bit of both because that makes it more enjoyable, that makes it more persuasive, right? So let's look at some examples here. Basically, what I want you to think about, why do you need to know these? First of all, you need to know these because they're going to be talked about in tons of different settings. But additionally, you need to be able to identify when I throw a text in front of you, what is its purpose? Is its purpose to persuade you? The author is going to act very differently if they're aiming to persuade you than if they're trying to inform you or if they're trying to entertain you. And sometimes we mean to do one thing, but we tend to do another. For example, I might be trying to inform you, but instead of informing you of, the difficulties of camping, I entertain you with a story about how everything went wrong. I really need to look at what's my goal and to keep that goal in mind. Or when I'm reading a text, I need to see, does this person match their goal? I don't want you trying to do too many things at once. You need to know what you're trying to do and do that one thing or those two things really, really well so that you accomplish your main goals, okay? So let's look at this. So if you have something that's purely persuasive, this includes advertisements. Advertisements like the kind that you're going to see thrown to little kids that just have sparkle and glitter all around them, right? That's solely to persuade them. Or any appeals to emotion, right? When you cry mommy and daddy, oh, I want it so badly, and you give them the little puppy dog eyes, you're just appealing to their emotion. You're not really giving them any detailed information, okay? But you're persuading them. Some texts are just persuasive. However, most of the time we're not going to just persuade you because you're going to do a better job for those of us who are logical, reasoning based if you also inform us. But the goal is to inform for a specific reason. So I'm informing you, but I'm informing you in order to demonstrate something or persuade you of something. So, for example, letters to editors or infomercials, right? Think of an infomercial. This is probably a pretty good example. If you've ever seen it for Bowflex or Medifast or something, they provide you a lot of information, but their information is swung in a very particular bias, right, to present you. First, for example, if I'm trying to sell you on an exercise machine, I'm going to inform you about how good exercise is for you. I'm going to inform you of different types of exercise, right? I'm going to provide you some information. This might also just be in an argument. I'm trying to, inform you of your options, but also persuade you of the one that I think is best. There's a little bit of overlap here, right? So you're always kind of thinking, what's our goal? But you usually have one main focus, okay? So let's look at informational text. Text with a main goal of providing information or explaining something include manuals, atlases, or almanacs, okay? Really, these don't have very much else going on in them. They're basically just informing you. But let's take a textbook, okay? A textbook, its main goal is to inform you, but it informs you from a very certain perspective. So I heard Mr. Blaylock mention it would be very different if we wrote U.S. history textbook from the perspective of Native Americans, right? So we are persuading you, but mainly we're aiming to inform you. So you got to remember what your main focus is. Okay, let's take a look over here. Narrative text. Let's take some narrative. If something is pure narrative, its goal is to entertain you. Okay, it's to get you hooked. It's to make you enjoy it. Whether that's the Hunger Games or Edgar Allan Poe trying to get you a short story that's just gonna consume you, that you have to sit it in one sitting, you have to read it in one sitting. That they're trying to entertain you. They're trying to catch you. Okay, that's really great. And so a lot of texts include a narrative aspect. A lot of times the best informational texts or the best persuasive texts also include a narrative aspect because it makes it more engaging. Okay, but you got to remember, again, what is my goal? So taking a look over here, informational narrative texts. These include, for very easy examples, biographies or autobiographies, right? If you've ever read a biography or an autobiography, they're providing you tons of information on that person, but they're not just written as a list of facts. They're written as a sort of story to give you a holistic picture and to make it something enjoyable, okay? I personally love to read biographies and autobiographies because they're as good as a novel, but they're true to life stories that I can feel good about pulling information from, okay? How about this? Narrative persuasive text. These are some of the greatest texts out there in the world. They persuade you through means of narrative, but you got to remember, this is only going to provide you a certain type of information. If I'm persuading you through narrative, then I'm persuading you through anecdotes or short experiences, right? Personal experiences. But there's a lot of things that can just even have a narrative or entertainment value that doesn't have a storyline. So for example, a personal essay. If you don't know what a personal essay is, it's basically like a memoir where you tell something that happens to you and give a moral to it or give a message. A call to action poetry. This is like revolutionary poetry, or if I'm wanting you to do something, but I'm going to put it in pretty language for you. Finally, there are some texts that have narrative, persuasive, and informational texts into it, but it's hard to find these because you usually have one focus. So to try to accomplish 3 at once, that's hard. And that's usually not even your goal. Sometimes you just end up doing it per chance. But sometimes that's our goal. One good example is historical fiction novels. So I am aiming to inform you of a time period, but I am also trying to give you a good story, and I'm trying to get that story to persuade you of an idea. I'm going to give you an example. How many of you have watched or read the book slash movie The Help? The Help is a story of women who worked um, during the civil rights movement, worked in the South after slaves were free. It informs you a lot of what life in the South was like back then. It gives you a lot of insight, right? So it informs you. It tells you a great story. You care about the characters, so it's a narrative, but it also persuades you of a perspective, okay? All right, audience. You guys need to think about your audience. This is the biggest thing I want to get you to. You can read all this. I have this PowerPoint up for you to read in full detail, but I just basically want to cover main concepts here. So every text has or should have, I should really emphasize that, or should have an intended audience. And by identifying that audience and considering how to best approach that audience, your writing will be made better. Okay, that writing will be made better. Ooh, somebody's gonna catch me. I wrote identifying twice. Sorry guys, just cross this one out. But considering your audience, you're gonna make it better. Okay, I'm gonna teach you something very, very differently because you are a bunch of high schoolers, different than I would if I was teaching college students, if I was teaching elementary students. You know, I used to tutor, and I used to tutor kids 4 years old through high school. I could teach the very same concept. Sometimes I didn't teach it that often, but I could teach the same concept very different ways, but I need to approach my audience, right? So I want you to consider this idea. Consider persuading these two crowds of eliminating vending machines. So, you know, soda machines or cookies, right? Imagine if I was to persuade learners of why I'm going to eliminate vending machines, or I'm going to persuade administration, right? Or the administrative team, right? That's going to be very two audiences. If you ever think about this, have you ever noticed when you watch a TV show that there's certain commercials on that station? Ransley, that you guys have heard about, watches like Disney Channel, and they don't have that many commercials. But he watches some TV shows with for kids, and every commercial is geared towards kids, right? We usually fast forward them, but that's because there's a ton of people who make their money just marketing, and you can market best when you have a select audience or a specific audience in mind. Okay, how would you persuade these two crowds differently? I want you guys just to think about that. Okay, finally, form. Form is your medium, okay, your medium. This could be iMovie or essay or letter to the editor or letter to your boss or memo, any kind of medium, okay? Every medium or every form has its pros and cons, but you need to follow that form well, okay? So take advantage of your form. Do one thing and do it very, very well. Don't try to do too much. What I mean by this is take on the form that you have been either given, okay? So we assign you a certain form, or down here, identify the strengths and weaknesses of each form before you take it on, and consider your options. Choose the form that fits best what you want to do. You want to do your form well. If you are trying to do a keynote presentation, you are not writing paragraphs. That will be boring. People won't be able to read it, right? If you're doing an iMovie, there are things that are good in iMovie, but there's also limitations, okay? It's like watching your favorite book become a movie, and then imagine it becoming a live action play, right? You have an entirely different experience in each of those, and each has their own pros and cons. But when you take on form, it's very important that you do that form well. So you need to know what that form requires of you, okay? For this one, you guys don't have any ELAB other than this to pay attention to this. We will be practicing this in class. Always be sure to consider what? Audience, the author's purpose, your audience, and your form. Thanks, guys.